Ladies, gentlemen, and others, welcome back to Boz Comics. So, today we are moving back away from simply discussing comic books themselves, and we're going to talk about the drama. We're going to talk about the drams, specifically that which surrounds the now canceled Dynamite Comics collaboration with known Comicsgate affiliate Cecil. Cecil is a guy who, so full disclosure, I don't even really know exactly what Cecil does. I think he's done some writing on some Comicsgate projects. I think he's got a YouTube channel. I may have watched it back in the day. I think his big claim to fame is that he's more of like a fan of a lot of Comicsgate creators, and he occasionally provides thoughts and commentary. I think his whole thing in the Comicsgate community is more that he's just like everybody's friend, and they just think he's really funny. I don't know. I'm not trying to like shortchange him. I haven't been paying attention. So if Cecil is this guy that's been doing way more than I'm aware of, that's perfectly fine. Feel free to let me know in the comments down below. But as I understand it, he's kind of just been almost like a Comicsgate groupie, like just a fan of the community. And I guess he's contributed some writing. He has offered up his likeness, if you will, to provide, provided it for numerous projects, whatever. I know he was going to do this comic called Cash Grab with Nurkish and some other people a while back, and then there was all kinds of drama as that fell apart, but whatever. Like, the point is, whatever it is that Cecil does, he is well liked within the Comicsgate community. And Dynamite Comics right now, they're one of the smaller but still like known comic book publishers out there. They've been doing this thing recently where they've been making agreements with known figures within the comics community. They have provided cover art, like variant covers, for Dynamite's properties, and then they've crowdfunded those variant covers, reaching out to their respective fan bases, their respective communities, and kind of like, hey, if you want this officially sanctioned Dynamite cover, you can chip into this crowdfunding campaign. And from what I've seen, it's been pretty successful. I know Ethan Van Sciver, who I will readily admit I cannot stand. I've talked about this before, I think. But Ethan Van Sciver has done this a couple of times to much financial success. That Star Wars girl did one not too recently. And now Cecil has done it. I know there have been others too, but those are the ones that I'm familiar with. So Cecil was slated to do this cover. And I guess Kwanza Osei-Jeffo, who is a figure within comics, he's a writer. He is most noticeable for his creator-owned property, Black, which I believe he has published with Black Mask Comics. I could be wrong about that. Comicsgate has had a bug up its ass about Kwanza Osei-Jeffo for quite a while. The guy has gone on a lot of pretty impassioned rants in the past about race, racial issues. Kwanza is a black man. His work is very much about racial issues, racial tensions, racism, race is very prevalent throughout his work. And he's come to blows with a lot of people in Comicsgate in the past because he can be very, very, I'm trying to be as charitable to all sides here and trying to keep my bias out of it as much as possible. So I'll say he's been very passionate, and some have accused him of going too far, being racist himself, just over the top. And then his usual response is, I'm talking about racism, and if you can't handle it, sucks to be you. You shouldn't be such a pussy, basically. Which, depending on the context, is a sentiment that I, taken at face value, that's a sentiment I can wholeheartedly agree with. But as these things tend to go, like some people accuse Kwanza Osajefo about, making everything about race. Whatever. Like, I hate talking about this stuff, but I feel like I need to. Uh, he's something of an agitator, much like many people accuse Comicsgaters of being. So they've come to blows numerous times in the past. So Kwanza in particular kind of seemed to spearhead this campaign on social media, along with several other comic book creators in the industry, more on the inside of things, to push back against this latest Dynamite cover. Hey, this guy Cecil associates with Comicsgate. Comicsgate is a hate group. Why are you allowing this sort of collaboration to continue? The pushback got really fucking bad, so Cecil and Dynamite kind of reached an accord and made a statement like, hey, we didn't know this cover would be so divisive, so we're not moving forward with it. And again, I find this really strange because maybe this is a straw that broke the camel's back kind of situation. But like, for God's sake, Ethan Van Sciver did like at least 3 covers with Dynamite. And I don't remember there being this level of pushback. There were certainly some people that complained, but like, I can't stand Ethan, but Ethan actually does stuff. Like he's actually like in comics, like it or not. And I don't remember there being nearly this level of pushback. Cecil is just a guy. Unless I'm missing something, he's barely a creator. But we're going to pile on this guy simply for associating with Comicsgate. That's what I really want to talk about today. Apparently, what really hurt Cecil in this scenario, and hurt Dynamite too, because, they lost out on quite a bit of money in pulling back from this crowdfunding arrangement. And God knows how much potential business they've lost out in the future now too, because I doubt nearly as many independent creators who identify with Comicsgate or are at least sympathetic to them are going to want to do business with them now going forward. But the problem here is I've seen lots of talk online about this situation. ComicTropes, which is a channel I actually really like and recommend and think you should follow. ComicTropes, he got into it with notable Comicsgate creator John Malin, who is another person I want to stress I don't like John Malin very much. I do not like Ethan Van Sciver at all. But John Malin and Chris, the guy from ComicTropes, they got into a very public spat on Twitter. Chris was like, hey, Comicsgate is a hate group. John Malin was like, nah, fam, it's really not. Like, we welcome all sorts of creators, which is what they always say. Side note, I've said it before, but I haven't seen many liberal voices in Comicsgate. In fact, I don't think I've seen any liberal voices in Comicsgate. The only people I know personally that have been involved in Comicsgate are either people that are like loud and proud conservatives or people who have eschewed politics at all whatsoever. If there are people on the left in Comicsgate, I'm not really familiar with them. But at any rate, Chris is like, hey, Comicsgate is a hate group. John Malin's like, nah, we welcome creators and customers of all stripes. And then Chris comes back with what I think forms the heart of the argument here. Chris from ComicTropes, he says, well, John, don't try to gaslight me. We all know that Comicsgate has harassed and hurt many people. Not all of them, but many of them. I'm kind of winging the quote here. This is not an exact quote. You can look up the exchange on Twitter. I can't be bothered. Because it's really just, it's indicative of, it's like a microcosm of what I think the biggest issue is here. Cecil is just a guy. As far as I know, he's committed no hate crimes. He's not like engaged in any online harassment. He's not, and I don't mean like, we can disagree over what constitutes harassment, what's just being a dick, and what is just criticism. because that's kind of like the ongoing argument over the last few years with this whole mess, right? Uh, dickish behavior versus criminal behavior versus just heated, passionate discussion. Cecil's just a guy who is certainly, I don't believe he's hurt anyone or done anything like untoward. I think Cecil here is really falling victim to this idea of guilt by association. But Comicsgate and those that fly its flag have something of a stake in this too. They got something of a problem here that I have not seen anyone, bearing the Comicsgate flag really address, and it's going to continue to be a problem. The well is poisoned. Whether it's true or not, too many people associate Comicsgate with bad acts and hate and harassment, criminal activity, sexism, misogyny, just racism, all sorts of horrible things. Now, I've been very open about the fact that while I don't, that has not been my experience with Comicsgate. I'm pretty tired of them. I think that whatever good might have been inherent in the movement has kind of been lost in the shuffle. But it has not been my experience that Comicsgate as a whole is a hate group or a harassment campaign. But I guess the inherent problem when we're talking about a movement that is just, unified by a hashtag, right? That doesn't have a concrete series of values, that means different things to different people and doesn't require any sort of buy-in to claim membership. That's a problem, because then the people who are more like me, when I used to call myself Comicsgate, and they just want to literally talk about comics and argue about what they think is hurting the storytelling, the art, the presentation, the business, when they want to argue over what constitutes a healthier relationship between creators and consumers, all those things. Those people that just want to have an earnest discussion are swept up alongside people who do more heinous things, right? We're all tarred with the same brush. Now, I've always been a big advocate for the idea that we should judge people on their individual merits. But when anyone can say what Comicsgate is or is not, you sort of run into the same problem that you have with things like the Black Lives Matter movement or Antifa, where those who detract from those groups will say that, oh, well, BLM, so many terrible things have been done in the name of BLM, so many terrible things have been done with, in the name of Antifa. Like, look at the innocent people who have been hurt during protests. Look at, the common example with Antifa is like cracking people over the head with bike locks and shit. All right. But then the flip side of that is, but it's just a hashtag. And there are so many people who claim BLM or Antifa who the most they do is just, share things they feel online. They've never hurt anybody. They've never done anything untoward. They're certainly not terrorists. They're not harassers. They're just, people who are upset about the way of the world, and they're talking about it online. This is where my whole trying to be a bridge thing comes in. So all these hashtag movements, like, they're great for the memes, I guess, but it can very quickly become corrupted when there's no buy-in, when there's no rigid idea about what their beliefs actually are, and when they don't police themselves. Now this is what I really think we should be looking at. The reason why I think we should all get away from Comicsgate as a whole. Now, one of the biggest aspects in Comicsgate was always, free speech is paramount. We should be able to say whatever we want. Now, let's just establish that whether you're on the left side or the right side of the political spectrum, freedom of speech is important. Freedom of speech also does not mean freedom from consequence. If you call my wife a dumb bitch, I'm going to punch you in the face. You have the freedom to say that. You don't have any freedoms that are going to stop me from beating the crap out of you. It's like that, you know. The common example, I guess, is you have the freedom to stand up and shout fire in a. Well, no, that's actually the fire example is more like a limitation on free speech, I suppose. But you get the idea, right? Like, you can say whatever you want, but other people are going to respond to that. Freedom of speech, on the face of it, is just meant to be protection from government overreach when it comes to saying what you want. That doesn't mean that people who run businesses or people who engage on platforms might not have something to say about the stuff coming out of your mouth. But freedom of speech is important, even where there might be consequences for the speech that you are putting out there. But the big issue at hand is that when you don't, I'm all for saying people should be able to say whatever they want. But when people say horrid things to their opponents, and when they start pushing into uncomfortable territory, right? When they start getting gross, and I don't even think that's most people. I want to clarify. My experience with people who use the Comicsgate hashtag, 90% of them are not anything like that. They don't harass people. They don't go after people. They don't hurt people, right? But what's the thing? What becomes most prominent? The people who just give a genuine critique of something online and just happen to say hashtag Comicsgate? Or is it the people that get into public slap fights with creators like Gail Simone on Twitter and, you know, start talking about SJWs and diversity hires and shit like that? Dude, there's no way to talk about those things and not sound like an asshole. Let me just be real with you. You got to stop using those tactics. Nobody wants to listen to that. You sound like a belligerent douchebag. Stop using terms like SJW or NPC, okay, or cucked or any of that. You sound like a child. No one will ever take you seriously. It's time to move on from that. Okay? I cannot stress this enough. That is child speak. It's time to move on. It's time to be more adults. Okay? You know, they like to, there's lots of criticism that gets leveled at these creators that swear publicly on their platforms. But then those same people that go, oh, geez, how childish of you for using foul language, will go on and say things like SJW and NPC and, you know, cuck and whatever, soy boy. And it's like, you sound like trash. Stop. No one will listen to you. But when you see that kind of vitriol from the loud and obnoxious people, and nobody within this hashtag movement, I'm not saying, like, you're not responsible for the actions of other people, but we talked about consequences. So when people calling themselves Comicsgate don't make a big show of telling assholes to stop being assholes because they claim to so fervently be like slavishly devoted to the concept of free speech, well, that's what perpetuates this idea that Comicsgate is nothing more than a hate movement. It's targeting women and minorities and LGBT people, you know, all this. That's where it comes from. Because you let the most vocal and the grossest and most aggressive among you go unchallenged. Because you don't want to appear like a cuck who doesn't believe in free speech. Well, you know what? Take one for the team in the name of common sense and decency. Because this is the bed that you've made for yourselves. If you're going to attach that label. You know, Cecil is just a guy. But because he calls himself Comicsgate, he got fucked on real hard. He lost out. His fans lost out. Their backers, the campaign for the cover, they lost out. Everyone loses. You know, yeah, everyone acts like assholes. Everybody loses. It's ridiculousness. And honestly, I think it's too late. I think it's too late. I think it's time to just move on and try. If you want to find a new way to unify, set some fucking ground rules, start an actual organization, start a nonprofit. Start a nonprofit that's just set up to crowdfund money to then offer as grants to comics that push values that matter to you, right? Or like a new movement used to drum up cash to support new upcoming voices, right? Or market creator-owned comic projects that you believe in, shit like that. I don't know. There's any number of ways to do that. I still hold so many of the same values. I do think that the big two especially are fucking really awful right now. I think their storytelling, especially Marvel, is kind of in the toilet. I do think that there are instances where they promote some progressive ideals to their own detriment, because they make horrible assumptions about their own audience and how terrible they are. And do think that a lot of pros, like in this situation, right? So this whole Cecil situation, a lot of pros have been awful. There's so many people that used to collaborate with Dynamite that have started saying, well, I'm never going to do this again because you collaborated with the Cecil motherfucker. They were attacking the CEO. Oh, you continue to be friendly to Comicsgate. You know, you're friendly to this hate movement, you know? And I go back to Chris from ComicTropes, and it's like, but you acknowledge in your own fucking statement that, like, you realize that, like, not all of these people are the same. You've literally said that in your tweets, but you're painting them all with the same brush, and you don't see a problem with this. You know, so there's a problem on both sides of the equation, and it's basically worked out to be a zero-sum game. Nobody's ever going to win here, because the reality is, Comicsgate is a large movement. There is a large audience there. And every time shit like this goes down, you alienate them further. And that's not good for business. It's money on the table that you're pushing away. And it's people that you're alienating who genuinely are not about the things that you keep claiming they're about. Their only crime is believing in what Comicsgate says on the tin and then getting caught up in the mudflinging when the ists and the phobe, accusations start going around. But the way to safeguard against that is to police your own community. You're not responsible for your fans, but it's also stupid to try and fucking argue that you don't have influence on your fans. Right? That's all it would take. That's all it would take. When you got people out there like fucking John Della Rose, who is another motherfucker I cannot stand. I've seen him be horrible to people, and I think it's him putting on an act because he likes to be like a shock jock among comic creators or whatever. I just think he's an asshole. I'm never going to tell you not to buy his books. Buy what you think, you'd like. I just think as a person, he presents himself as a douchebag, and I personally don't want to have anything to do with him. And he will just be so horrible to some people on social media. And I'm like, nobody calls him out on this behavior. Nobody tells him, hey, John, stop being a fucking asshole. Ethan Van Sciver, he and his little war campaign dick-sucking fuck buddies can be such jack-offs. And, Ethan won't fucking say or do anything. He won't say, hey, guys, stop fucking being a bunch of babies. Stop being so awful, God, if you would fucking reach out to these creators and start putting in effort and saying like, hey, like, I recognize you're getting a lot of hate and that's not okay. If I've contributed to that in any way, like, I'm sorry. There's this in the era of cancel culture, there's this big idea that keeps getting tossed around, like, never apologize. It's a terrible idea to apologize. And I do agree with that to a certain extent, but like, again, there's a common sense element to that everybody likes to ignore because it's fucking convenient. Yeah, you shouldn't apologize to people that you genuinely don't feel, because if you apologize to people who don't really want your apology, then it's blood in the water. But at the same time, there's nothing wrong with making an earnest effort to address people who genuinely feel like they're being hurt and being harassed and being like, I'm really sorry this is happening to you. Ever since I relaunched Boz Comics, I've been making more of an effort to reach out to certain creators who, in my Comicsgate days, we would kind of ignore and meme and laugh at. I've spoken to a few people now that would probably surprise you. I've been asked to not say anything, which I know is like a giant fucking cop-out, so you're going to have to take this next bit with a grain of salt. I fully understand. I encourage it. But trust me, if you can, I've spoken to a few creators who are always called SJWs and fucking memed to death, right? And when I reach out to them with compassion, now I've worked in human services, so I think part of it might be that I'm a lot better suited when it comes to actually talking to people. I know how to talk to people. I know how to listen. I know how to empathize. I know how to help people feel comfortable so that they can talk about what they're really feeling. And I think that helps some people really kind of get to the heart of their issues. And the thing that I've heard numerous times now is that they genuinely feel, I get the impression that a lot of these creators genuinely feel that they have been harassed. They've been maligned. They've been attacked, and their friends have suffered the same. Now, the thing that I think a lot of people miss is that it doesn't matter if in actuality that happened or not. It really doesn't. It really doesn't. I know that's hard to hear, but the reality is it doesn't matter if they were actually, if you can envision my air quotes here, actually harassed, actually stalked, actually attacked. Because it's enough. They genuinely feel like they were. Now, I don't want you to go to jail over anybody's fucking feelings. That's a nightmare world that I don't want to live in. But by the same token, you have to acknowledge what they're saying. You don't have to agree with it, but you have to hear it. Because if you don't hear it and acknowledge it and do something to address the issue, that's where the problems come from. I feel like there's just this disconnect that people just don't get. They want to say and do whatever they want without consequence. Without fear of consequence, I should say. And I said, oh man, we don't, why don't people, this goes back to what I said before about a lot of these people see conservatives and they see Comicsgate and what have you as the bad guys. Not just opposing viewpoints, the literal bad guys. So when you don't stand up to bad actors, that's what's going to happen. That is what's going to happen. They're going to run with this shit. And in people who are just trying to make comics, or any medium for that matter, they're going to get swept up. They're going to have a bad time. And it's all because too many people were so precious about, like, say what you want. Yes, say what you want, but you can call an asshole out for being an asshole. When you see people like JDA or EVS or, some of these other more spicy creators, you can like their work, you can yuck it up, you can have a good time. But if they say something that you genuinely think is like, oh man, that's a little hurtful to some people, you don't have to call them racist. You don't have to accuse them of being homophobic. Just fucking, dude, hey, like, easy. Like, that was maybe a bit much. I'm sorry. Maybe this is unpopular to say, but there's nothing wrong with that. Because when you don't keep the house clean, the cockroaches come in swarms. Okay? So that's where I think we're at. Jettison Comicsgate, get rid of it. It's toxic. It's not going to do anyone any good at this point. We need to move beyond it. We need to, if you care about comics, you need to just put yourself out there, say your piece, right? Don't attach any stupid hashtag movements to your ideas. It's not helpful. It's not going to do anything because you're going to get caught up with the worst of the people hitching to that wagon. And if you're not going to try to hold them accountable, you got nobody to blame but yourself. Boy, this one turned out to be a long one, but I had a lot to say. I hope it made sense. I hope it didn't bore you all to tears. I guess I'll just cut it there. So thank you all for listening. I hope I gave you something to think about. Links to relevant articles will be down in the description below. Until next time, I'll see you guys tomorrow.